Hello, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us on the Truth Hurts show. Chauncey Leopardi, aka Squints, and I got my co-host Brian Goldstein here, and we got our new friend Zack Williams in the house today. Thank you for joining us, bro.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Obviously, we're big fans of your father, and we'd love to hear what you're doing in the mental health space these days. Brian told me that you were going to be on the show, and I got super excited because, I come from an acting background, and, your dad was kind of a guy that could do it all. And I was very fond growing up watching him from from the early days on. And then, some of my favorite roles, to be honest, were, I loved when he was in a dramatic setting, to be honest. I loved all of those stuff. So like Good Will Hunting and these type of things were some of my most fond memories. But welcome. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I mean, sure. I mean, at this point, I'm very focused on raising a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I run 2 companies. Mental health company, nutrition for mental well-being, and started a media company.
Awesome.
We've got a very exciting project that we're developing around the healing power of the brain, which I'm excited to share more about.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. And for me, at this point in my life, aside from parenting, all roads in my life lead to my healing through mental health advocacy and entrepreneurship focused on mental well-being. That path for me started several years ago, started after my father died by suicide. But really what I discovered is that through a diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and depression, I was spiraling downward. I'm confident I wouldn't be here today if I continued along that path. I required a reconfiguration in terms of how I was looking at the world, how I was looking at myself, where I was at in terms of self-esteem, in terms of isolation, in terms of self-medication. And through that experience, I discovered that in order for me to heal, I needed to do a couple things. One is I needed to find ways in which I could be of service to others. And then 2, in order to properly be of service to others, I needed to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And so the big aha moment for me is I discovered that service-oriented activity and effort was my personal path to happiness and healing. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I've always loved building products, primarily digital products, software and the like, and supporting awesome entrepreneurs and achieving their visions.
Yeah.
It's something that's really important to me. It just so happened that scopes expanded to supporting nonprofits, supporting policy initiatives, supporting other entrepreneurs, and then supporting ultimately customers, potentially patients, and discovering nutrition for mental well-being.
Yeah, I think patients, because we forget that a lot of times. I'm in the cannabis space, and in this new realm, we never called them customers. We called them patients in the Prop 215.
Totally.
Because we were helping medicate or treat ailments, and that's the way we went about it. Calling somebody a customer was a negative connotation,
Yeah, and I have some experience helping start companies in the cannabis space, investing in companies, started learning about policy initiatives and seeking to support certain policies focused on helping grow the industry. And the thing for me is there's all sorts of intersectionality between mental well-being and cannabis usage. For me personally, I discovered I was quite allergic.
Mm-hmm.
I did end up using certain CBD products, and I'm really excited about things like rare cannabinoids.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a bit about it, but like CBN, incredible for sleep, CBG, great for muscle recovery and things like that. Not necessarily directly related to mental well-being, but it is adjacent. And the thing that excites me is that there's now this revolution around how patients and potentially, people in the consumer realm see natural solutions for mental well-being. And I think cannabinoids and the body's endocannabinoid system and how they interface with one another are an essential part of that. For me personally, I found nutrition to be extremely helpful, specifically discovering endogenous compounds like amino acids, minerals like zinc and so forth, that when taken in ways that they could support our body's deficiencies, actually created a neurotransmitter health environment that enabled me specifically to feel more settled, more comfortable in my skin, not experiencing anxiety in the same way, not experiencing depression the same way. And for me, whether they're exogenous compounds like cannabinoids or endogenous compounds like amino acids, ultimately the preference and the orientation around people discovering that these compounds and solutions can be extremely healing, potentially fully supporting around all sorts of considerations and conditions is extremely exciting.
Yeah. The thing about big money coming into the industry, just speaking in the cannabis space, is that with it, it's brought big ag techniques. It's brought, genome mapping and things. So the plant is evolving. We're breeding in certain directions, and things are opening up, and we're getting to a space where, we can tailor and work towards helping certain ailments and things. So that's awesome. Let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about your transition into the mental health space. And let me just ask, is this something that was prevalent in your life prior to your dad's passing, or did it just bring that on at that moment?
Well, I think things came to a head for me after his passing, but prior to that, there were trends that were starting to increase in terms of frequency and intensity. For me, drinking was always part of my life through my teens onward, and drinking heavily to problem drinking to alcoholism was a progression for me. And what I started realizing it became a crutch and a coping mechanism that I became extremely dependent upon to help manage my experience with the world and with people. And so that was part of it. I had anxiety from a very early age onwards that contributed to insomnia and all sorts of different things. And I had trauma from a very early age, which I wasn't willing to recognize as trauma. 12 years old, my cousin died by suicide. This was in the mid-90s. He was 13 at the time.
Jeez.
I mean, that had a dramatic impact on me, but I didn't acknowledge that dramatic impact until my, until midway through my adult journey. And, that was very traumatic for me in hindsight. But I had a set of coping mechanisms which didn't enable me to acknowledge the trauma. And then, graduating through high school and moving to New York City in September of 2001 and experiencing my first week of New York University in September of 2001 was an eye-opening experience.
The world changed.
It was an entry point into my adult life. And
that didn't make the anxiety any better.
No, but again, I wasn't willing to acknowledge the trauma,
of course,
that it caused, because for me, it's like I didn't know folks who were in the towers. And therefore, for me to have specific feelings around, hey, this is dysregulating, this is challenging, this is traumatic, didn't feel right at the time. And leading up into the present era, I think as a culture, we need to start acknowledging that world events, things that are happening culturally, can be traumatic, and it's okay to acknowledge the trauma, especially amongst communities of men and so forth. We can have challenges being vulnerable. the thing is, for me, and this required a reorientation, because I always saw that vulnerability as being a form of weakness.
Yeah, weakness. So
Right? What I've come to learn over time is actually you can develop a deep sense of inner strength and resilience if you're able to come from a place of understanding, empathy, and confidence when you share your story.
Yeah.
And if we can build that inner resilience, then we can find new ways to connect with people, new ways to heal from our personal traumas that we've accrued over our lives. Just acknowledgement of these specific traumas is challenging. And, you know, my heart goes out to people who were directly impacted by, you know, everything that happened on September 11th.
Yeah.
Who had family members, friends, coworkers, colleagues who were.
I'm sure everybody in the city and in the country itself was connected to somebody in some sorts of ways. If not just mentally, we all kind of went through it together as well. Viewing it, I think it was the first real, I think that's the switch in the old world of like us getting the news secondhand, into like, we kind of all saw that live and lived it firsthand.
Well, let's look at the historical precedent, because I think it's an interesting precedent. If you look at times when people say, I remember when I was there, I was doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
There are moments, and for, you know,
Kennedy assassination.
for our parents' generation, it was Kennedy.
Assassination. They all remember where they were and what happened when it came on the news.
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, the space shuttle, the Challenger exploding. I remember that when my parents' generation as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, and now we're, you know, through the pandemic, and like it seems like there are maybe different types of world events that are occurring, but, you know, I would say maybe we think we're acclimating to this stuff.
Yeah.
But really, at the end of the day, I'm thinking back in the pandemic and everything that went on with us and our businesses and our loved ones and everything. And like, you know, that was 2 years ago.
there was a bunch of, at the highest levels of everything, of finance, government, business administration, however you want to put it. There were some very fear-based things going on, and people reacting out of like a very fear-based, not knowing effect. And it was like a snowball of like, this is nothing to worry about. Oh, this is a worry. You know what I mean? And it was like, it kind of happened really fast. And nobody believed that was ever possible of happening, or that anything could, but we've seen a domino effect into like, oh wow, the world just changed again in front of us in real time.
Well, the thing that was wild to me too was like, I remember having to suit up to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, the challenge was I was living with, I mean, during the early stages of the pandemic, my mother was living with my wife and my young son.
Yeah.
And we were like, we weren't quite sure what was going on.
Nobody knew. No.
Didn't know if, you know, the grocery stores would stock out.
Yeah.
Right? And
toilet paper.
Yeah, the toilet paper thing, right? But now it's funny because like you walk into a grocery store and you have those moments like, remember when?
Yeah.
And it was like, it was a number of months ago.
Yeah.
But you know what?
I think our perception of time changed during that.
It fully impacted our perception of time.
I feel like everybody aged 10. I feel like that was a decade in itself.
Totally, and it impacts our
pre-COVID is like, it seems like a distant memory before then.
Totally.
And things have totally altered.
Right, and you know, it impacts our perception of connecting with other people.
100%. Some handled it better than others.
Yeah.
Some were very impacted by it, and I don't know that some people will ever fully recover from it.
Yeah, totally. Well, you know, like there are also interesting things around kind of how, you know, certain innovations in technology, like distribution of, you know, alcohol, drugs, you know, whatever, you know, cannabis products, even things like pharmaceuticals, that was totally turned on its head. And that, you know, it accelerated this process where you can get everything at your doorstep all the time. You don't even need to go out and interact or interface.
They made it where you could just sit on your couch and do everything.
And to be honest, I think that people found that was a much better option for them as well.
Yeah.
In some way, you know?
Yeah. And it was interesting to see that cultural shift. But then at the same time, you know, we need to manage our social activity because if you're going out into the world.
Have like, you know, social norms of like, you know, respect factors and knowing how to interact with each other and wait in a line and give personal space and yeah, I understand where you're going with that.
Yeah. So you
The
know,
more we isolate ourselves, the harder it is for us to interact in a
What
public
about all the
space.
kids? Like, you have young kids.
totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing: is that I'm one of the candidates who's prone to introversion. So if you know, can have things delivered at my home and the like, you know, it's a wonderful thing for me.
Yeah.
The challenge is that I tend to self-select into like more and more introversion, and so the question is, how can I actually go out and socialize? How can I go out? How can I go out and interact with people, and not just it being about, you know, going out and speaking to a room full of people or something along those lines. And this is I'm you know, I have friends who I'm very close with. I don't see them enough because, you know, we're talking every day on
Yeah, none of us
WhatsApp
do.
and what have you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what I'm starting to realize is that I've developed certain orientations and activity that's very suitable to me as an introvert, right? But over time, it's created these habits that are preventing me from going out and connecting with people in the way that I feel like maybe I should be doing. Does that make sense?
100%.
Oh, yeah.
I think that this connecting with each other and this public shared space is the, you know, it's the fulfilling thing. Like you said, transitioning into mental health and then finding that you needed to help people and to, you know, have a positive impact in that manner. It's like, we do a lot of business podcasts. Obviously, the chase of money and things is prevalent in everybody's lives.
Yeah.
We're bombarded by it on Instagram and these apps now that we can see who's who and what's what and these things, and we gravitate towards it because we're humans and we like shiny objects. We're
all subject.
Yeah, we're all subject to this. But I feel like no matter what I achieve or the next goal or the next thing, and that we find this common theme that there's an underlying thing where no matter how successful someone gets, they tend to be unhappy with the result of the thing they were chasing, right?
Well, I mean, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're framing it as a question, but it
No,
felt
just
like one.
just we feel like there's always something more, right?
Yeah.
And helping and camaraderie and being in a space where you know, it could just be checking in on someone or listening to them for a little while. It you know, it feels good to help others.
Well, let's take a step back for a sec and like, let's look at it from a neuroscientific perspective.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have, you know, taken interest in the space for quite a number of years. And, you know, the way I've understood our reward system to be structured is one in which very successful people tend to have a very specific way of structuring how they seek pleasure. Goal oriented. They achieve certain stage gates and things like that. The challenge is that for some people, they end up winning. You win the game in starting a certain business. You have an exit event or something like that. And then it's very hard to restructure that reward system around that next set of achievement, right? This can happen for any number of different things. And so, you know, the question is, if it's a reward system based around accumulation, one of the challenges could be there might never be enough if we're structured around a certain way. And I've talked to friends who are very wealthy who have experienced that, you know, in the hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. If they're not oriented around meaningful activity for them, what ends up occurring is it's like you're trying to fill a leaky bucket, because you keep on chasing that experience that you had at a certain point when you hit a certain threshold, earn that first million, achieve that first success with your company, whatever it may be. And it just gets challenging. And I've experienced it with my life. And you know, one of the ways in which I've have set up my reward system is, looking at big challenges from a socio-medical perspective. You look at the youth mental health epidemic, the youth crisis around mental health. And it's a massive issue that requires very dynamic innovation, requires enormous resourcing from the public and private sector, communities, states, civic institutions, and so forth. And it's like, for me, it's like, oh, well, if you can set up your reward system around solving this issue, you can spend multiple lives trying to do that, right? And I realized that there's a way in which I was structuring kind of, nearly impossible endeavors so that it could keep me busy for a long, long time. But what I realized from that is that there's actually a lot of meaning derived from making progress with that. Like even when you start activating schools in terms of mental health program, when you start establishing successful policy initiatives in the state, it feels super rewarding. But the thing is that the ramp up to, achieving success is absolutely massive.
Yeah.
So, I'm
the
wondering,
mental health for the youth is a big thing because, we come from a time where obviously we've all felt persecuted or bullied or in a certain space, or like we couldn't live up to our parents' expectations. But it's greatly intensified now with social media and YouTube and the way that they live their life now, which is obviously not going to change. It's not something that I try to hide from my children because it's going to be there and they need to be aware of it, but their lives are public now, not just celebrities' lives, but everybody's life in some manner or such, and everybody can feel judged or like they're not enough for some reason. And it's tough, man. I feel bad for the youth because it is a different period.
Well, I want to bring up, are you familiar with behavioral sync?
It sounds familiar, but
okay. So there's a series of experiments done in the 20th century with mice and overcrowding.
Yeah.
They being researchers would put mice into a box and in density, and it ended up creating all sorts of dysregulation for these mice. They ended up self-harming, they ended up harming others, they ended up kind of gnawing on one another. Certain mice would retreat up into these little towers that were constructed as part of it, and it just created all this dysregulation, right? And technically, if you're talking about overcrowding, that's something we've experienced. Physical overcrowding, it's something we've experienced in human culture for thousands of years, right? In certain circumstances. And yes, there's issues with being pushed up against one another over long periods of time. It creates dysregulation for people. It's shown to happen. But I think one of the things that I think is being expressed in this era, in the 21st century, specifically now with mobile phones, the mobile era, call it the information age, post-information age, however you want to frame it now, artificial intelligence age, what have you. But I think we're seeing a certain form of digital overcrowding. And that the way we spend our days consuming information, interacting with others and things like that it's not a very fluid process. It's generally pretty choppy. It generally involves us cycling through a series of apps. It generally involves us, whether we're creating, posting, or commenting or consuming, it's chasing a dragon of sorts while we're being bombarded with interaction, good, bad, awful, neutral, while we're consuming more information in this never-ending journey. And I don't think it's particularly good for our mental well-being.
No, definitely not.
And I'm wondering if it's contributing to additional dysregulation for us. That's a form of digital overcrowding. The reason why I brought the experiments relating to the overcrowding of mice is that I don't think it's a physical thing occurring for us. I think it's actually digital in nature.
Yeah.
And mental.
and mental.
Well, yeah, we're overstimulated, definitely. And the kids are overstimulated from a very, very young age. Like, you know, under a year even, they're already, you know, reaching out for it, ready to be able to swipe and know and scroll. And they watch us doing it too. They're little sponges, you know.
Yeah.
I have young children as well, so I know I'm sure you see it. So does Brian. It's definitely something that needs to be looked at, and I agree with you. I think that even myself, which I feel like I'm pretty strong-willed and sound of mind for the most part, I find myself, you know, it can make things irritable. And then I feel like there's a digital replacement to real life in some sense, where like people are living as alter egos and different things in a digital space that in reality, I think it's easy to run to the life that you've created for yourself in a digital space, if that's maybe not the life that you've created for yourself in a physical space.
Yeah, I think
It's easier to find your people and be more accepted as to go out into the real world and be in the elements, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's an insightful way to frame it. The thing for me, and especially having young children, you know, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl, is that when they see us, my wife and I, family members, friends, whatnot, on our phones, paying attention to them, being fixated upon it, they're establishing a worldview. And it's, you know, it's very, you know, children have a very specific worldview. It's their surroundings. They're not interacting with social media yet, in most cases, the majority of cases. And, you know, if they're seeing our attention fixated upon this little device, this little box, and seeing how it's interacting with our interactions together and the like, then they're going to affix value to that box.
Yeah, it's getting the most attention.
Yeah, and so the thing is, and you know, one of the concerns for me is that, you know, my generation, I'm 40, and you know, I would say our generation, but
It is, yeah. I'm 40. I'll be 42 this year.
Okay.
Brian's right behind us.
Yeah, a couple years behind you guys.
It's all good. You'll get there. The consideration is, you know, we didn't grow up with our parents on mobile phones.
No. I think the world was more connected when phones were connected.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to frame it.
Fax machine era.
Fax, and then we had pagers, you know, and
we were getting more connected, but I mean,
we
remember a time when people had to physically talk to each other.
Yeah.
We remember a time when you couldn't get a hold of somebody.
Yeah.
Or you just ride your bike to their house.
The thought of that is kind of weird in itself, because there was a time where somebody left the house and you didn't get to talk to them until you seen them again, unless they called you.
And here's the thing: is you had to be okay with that.
You had to be.
And so your brain goes in a very specific way.
Yeah.
And so the concern for me is that, you know, we don't have to be okay with not getting in touch with folks in the mobile phone.
And we're not okay with it.
And we're not okay with it.
You can see that it develops severe anxiety for people that aren't okay with being disconnected.
They
It
actually,
could be my mother-in-law calling my wife and just repeatedly calling her until she picks up the phone. And it's always, we tend to think of the worst. Yeah, she can. And then vice versa. I mean, you know, people can be like, well, we're assuming that everybody's got their phone in their hand at all times.
Yeah.
It creates all types of different.
and if you take a phone away from someone over a period of time, they'll actually go through withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
There's actually neurochemical withdrawal systems. They start getting stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates.
I feel like everybody needs that detox now, though.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing, and this is what I've started advocating for in the past. At this point, it's been about 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
The premise of mental hygiene, right? And that we need to start looking at prioritizing mentally healing, mentally supporting activity on a daily basis, because just relying upon, you know, once a week, or, you know, whether, you know, I would say therapy, but therapy is now inaccessible for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody went cash. They won't take insurance.
Yeah, it's just not it's like, saw some recent data that high quality therapy is inaccessible for 95% of people,
Which is very sad.
which is sad, right? But so, you know, we can't be prioritizing mental health to either be once a week or when we hit a state of crisis, because the crisis care system, first off, is overwhelmed. Secondly, it's not designed to create long-term sustainable foundational solutions for you. So, you know, there's a cruel and unusual forcing function that requires us as human beings to figure out ways in which we can take matters into our own hands. You know, there's certain terms that have been applied. One is, you know, resilience development, another is kind of developing inner authority. But really the general premise of it, what is it that we can do in our lives? Nutrition, fitness, mindfulness, meditation, in some cases therapy, community support, even breath work and so forth. What can we apply? Spiritual practice, sleep, all these different things. For each individual is,
It's going to be different.
It's going to be different,
Yeah.
but how can we apply it on a daily basis where we're not feeling overwhelmed and dysregulated multiple times a week,
Yeah.
right?
Or multiple times a day for that matter.
Multiple times a day, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. For me,
And I think we all feel that regardless.
yeah. And so, you know, with this company, I've created PIM. Stands for Prepare Your Mind. It's not coincidentally my middle name, PIM, not Prepare Your Mind. My dad gave me the name. My wife Olivia June Williams and I created this company because I needed a nutritional foundation, because I was eating really poorly and I was doing unhealthy things to kind of manage those deficiencies, like self-medicating using alcohol. And, you know, when I stopped drinking alcohol, I was so anxious and depressed and just feeling terrible. And, you know, my wife, who had a similar journey in that her sister died by suicide when she was 10, and she had to go through, you know, a decades-long experience in terms of finding solutions for herself. She discovered nutrition, and she introduced me to nutrition for mental well-being, and I was super skeptical.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think this can be helpful for me. And then I went through this process in terms of trying these different products, sorted out my anxiety in 2 days, my depression in 2 weeks, through 2 different product stacks. One was focused on the GABA system, gamma aminobutyric acid, and the other was focused on the serotonin system. And through those 2 different product stacks, was able to basically find the solutions that enabled me to then start expanding my mind in terms of what I can do for my mental well-being. What other practices can I apply? And like,
Were you shocked? I mean,
Yeah.
2 weeks is like,
yeah, I was
had it
shocked.
been mind blowing that
Yeah.
something that it's been dealing with for a long period of time could be turned around that fast.
Yeah, but the thing is that what was really pronounced was the fact that I had these deficiencies in the first place,
Yeah.
because it's not everyone is going to experience that type of thing.
Uh-huh.
The thing is that the majority of Americans generally have insufficient diets nutritionally.
Of course.
And we've got a metabolic issue in the United States. 60% of Americans are pre-diabetic or diabetic.
Oh,
We're addicted to sugar.
Yeah. And so, you know, if you're eating a ton
All
of
of our
sugar.
food is the delivery system for more sugar.
Yeah. And so, right. And processed foods and, you know,
Doesn't
certain
matter
fats.
how you cut it. It all breaks down to the same thing.
Right. And so if you're eating, you know, certain types of fats and you're eating, you know, processed sugar
A lot
in
of
high
times
quantities, which I was doing all the time, especially after I stopped drinking alcohol.
Yeah, I bet.
Right. And so, so I found all these crutches and they were making me miserable. And then suddenly I found these nutritional solutions and I was like, okay, I can actually feel okay. But then I was like, okay, how can I now support myself through like what is modern life? What is a chronically stressful environment, right? And so, you know, you have to engage in other activity. You can't just rely upon nutrition.
No.
You know, I'm not particularly fit. I would like a better fitness regimen. There were times where I've over-exercised to get to the point, but then like it just fell out of whack for me.
It's not a natural I had a period in my life where I worked out heavily,
Yeah.
but for the most part, I never did. And I was, a thin frame, so it
You were a
worked for
tiny
me.
guy.
Yeah, it just worked for me, and it wasn't something that I thought about. But I do feel better when I am active.
Right. So that's a component
Getting
of
out
it.
into nature and getting some sunlight and
a
being
major
around
one.
nature.
Yeah.
It's like I mean, obviously there's tons of studies now, but it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
It
So
makes you feel more connected.
there is a nature connectivity part, and I started realizing, hey, like looking at my fitness ritual, I actually need to get out at least once a day
Yeah.
in some respect. And
Mentally too, as well.
mentally it was helpful for me.
Yeah.
It's one thing to get the endorphins running. I think that's helpful for a lot of people, but like I needed to get out and spend 25 minutes, half an hour,
Yeah.
just engaging and moving my muscles. But like expanding beyond that in terms of mindfulness and meditation and all the different things, what I started to discover was
There's a program that needs to happen.
I needed to get on my own program.
Yeah.
And then I started realizing other people can benefit by getting on their own program. Right? And so we created this brand, PIM, to educate people around just catalyzing that process, learning about what they can do for themselves. If they take our products, it can be helpful for them, but there's likely a bunch of other things that are helpful for them.
Does it start with a questionnaire or some sort of stock to get somebody headed in the right direction based off of their own
Yeah.
physiological traits?
Yeah. So in part, we develop. So yes, that's part of it.
Yeah.
We developed, surveys and so forth that would in turn recommend products. But where we wanted to go and what we developed was an entire coaching framework to educate people around what they can do for their own personal mental hygiene. The thing was, it was just biting off a lot for a company. And,
Yeah.
So what we did is we ended up taking the elements of those coaching frameworks and just turning it into content, which we share for free. But
It's a lot. It's a new space.
yeah,
Everybody has their own opinions about it. Like you said, even the nutrition side of it, coming from your wife, who said it helped her, you were still on the fence about, and
Yeah.
basically said, I don't think this is going to work for me.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you're looking at all the different elements of it, there's some really interesting research coming out of like the Stanford Metabolic Psychiatry Center. There's a woman there named Dr. Shabani Sethi who is focusing on the interaction of ketogenic diets, which we hear about a lot in certain contexts, definitely here in LA.
Yeah.
Ketogenic diets and the relationship with serious mental illness.
Yeah.
And it's shown that there's actual clinical efficacy in engaging in certain long-term nutritional protocols to support, long-term mental health dysregulation that manifests with serious mental illness and the like. And, there's other work done out of places like McLean Hospital of Harvard Medical School. There's Dr. Uma Nadu, who started the Nutritional Psychiatry Center. There's Dr. Chris Palmer, who recently wrote a book called Brain Energy. And, there's certain research institutions that are focusing on nutrition and lifestyle and all sorts of interesting research that's being done around all these different elements. But that's only a subset of one, of it. The research and understanding the efficacy of these different things is important, but then we need the cultural component.
Yeah.
Right? There's the media component. There's, our being inundated with, information, good, bad, and ugly, us seeing all sorts of folks promoting different products, and
We're bombarded by it.
We're
It's hard to
bombarded.
wade through.
you know
And obviously, I think we all seen the social experiment and seen that, the algorithm is feeding what it wants to feed, which is clickbait, right?
yeah, and
It's made to intensify and accelerate your attention to it. So
and look, we're complicit too.
Yeah.
We have to reach a customer or patient, depending on the framing and the context. We have to reach those folks.
yeah,
And we need to reach them in a way in which they're engaged, relative to the 100 other places they can be placing their finger on that little box that,
yeah,
that little touch screen that ultimately we are beholden to for, commerce and so forth. And so, I think the main thing for me is we're going to constantly work out new ways to engage folks around helping them understand more about themselves.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's my brand, but also through advocacy, through education, through, you know, our conversation now. I'm really hoping communities of men can start saying, hey, you know, I need to stop suffering in the way that I'm suffering, and need to find ways in which I can find a foundational approach to take care of my mental well-being.
Yeah.
Whether it involves connecting with people, whether it involves finding opportunities to share comfortably, whether it involves finding those mental hygiene rituals for them. Like, that's important for me. I think peers, potentially folks who others look up to, play an essential role of that, whether they're athletes, entertainers, but also community peers. That's essential.
Yeah, it's hard as a man. We had a friend on the show, Jimmy Rex, and he has a men's group that meets, and it's all focused around men's mental health and being okay in a shared space. And he opens it up, being vulnerable and learning how to be vulnerable with each other and knowing that there's support there, because it is something that I mean, we can go to like straight statistics and see that the rates of suicide and depression in the male space are higher, obviously. And I know that we don't deal with it in the same way. We're not as open about our feelings as women are.
Yeah.
We tend not to be.
Well, you know, but I think there's another element too, in that the way in which things like resentment manifest in different ways.
Yeah.
We tend to be more aggressive, you know, both in terms of how we interact with people, but also in terms of, you know, more physically oriented.
Yeah.
Resentment is, and that's a big topic in the recovery community.
I bet.
Just to
So
be
that's
clear. Yeah,
a lot of
but
this stuff stems from our own
yeah,
resentment towards ourselves or others.
ourselves, our family members, our peers, our employer, you know, what have you. And if we are, I think one of the key unlocks, at least for me personally, was learning how to manage those feelings of resentment and orient around actually finding peace with things not being exactly how we want them to be.
Yeah.
And focusing on the things that we can actually impact and affect change around. And knowing that it's like, there are folks, I never thought that there were people who I would qualify as being, you know, like enemies or you know, principal points of conflict in my life. And until I started, you know, aging as an adult, and I realized, you know, there are people out there who might not wish you or me well, and might be antagonizing you through this process. You know what you can do through that process? And the thing I started realizing, a lot of those actions, a lot of those things come from a place of resentment, frustration, self-worth issues, things like that. You know what you can do? You can be happy for them and wish them happiness along their journey, and then they no longer have power over you.
Exactly. It's up to us how we take that.
Exactly.
You know? We get to choose. I try to talk to my mother about that sometimes, and she tends to be very victim based, and life happens to her, not for her type of deal, you know. And you know, choosing to feel a certain way about an occurrence in your life. You obviously had these similar situations in your family, so it's our choice to feel. I think, like, you take the kids of an alcoholic, and you have the one that says, you know, of course I'm an alcoholic, look who I was raised by. And then you have the successful other sibling that says, well, of course I'm not like that, look who I was raised by, right? So it's our choice of who and how we perceive these things, and how we choose to act in return of our own experiences, right?
Yeah, the thing is if you give yourself the opportunity to let go of,
it's so relieving.
Yeah, if you give yourself the opportunity to let go of the resentment and frustration and so forth, and then can just wish people well along their journey. Yeah. The great thing is, you don't need to sit down with them and break bread with them.
No, just wish them well and move on.
Yeah, because the thing for me is the way in which I started thinking about things is like, okay, I can wish, even though they don't actively wish me well, they might even wish me harm or something in certain circumstances. Not like physically, they won't come to physically. No, I get it. One has to defend themselves. Yes. You know, or family. But if you're in a situation where you're not physically threatened, the thing you can do is you can, and this is where I kind of had the thinking a little bit skewed towards one way, in which I thought, oh, I can wish them happiness, and therefore I have to sit down and we have to have a restorative conversation, in which we kind of, find the conflict points, work through it and everything. You don't need to do that. No. You don't need to do that. What you can do is say, hey, I can wish them well on their journey, can wish them happiness in their life, and move the fuck on.
Yeah.
Right? And so,
that weight is gone.
That weight's gone. And you can say, I don't need to break bread with you. I don't need to engage in constructive conversation with you because it's not needed for myself, for my healing journey, and I wish you well upon your journey.
Yeah. I feel like, unfortunately, in all types of different relationships that come to a head, that sometimes letting go, wishing somebody well, accepting the fact that this is no longer somebody that needs to be in my life for whatever reason, and just going our separate ways is the most healthy approach to that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's things that have been said or things that have arisen that just there's no going back from, and it doesn't mean that we need to continue on this journey together. It's not so complete. We need to be okay with turning a new page.
Yeah. There are elements, and again, I'll refer to the recovery community.
Yeah.
Because I'm in recovery, I have been for several years. There are situations where amends need to be applied and things like that, and that's needs to be understood.
Yeah, I understand the steps. Yeah.
But there are circumstances where, first off, there are living amends that can be applied in terms of you can be comfortable not having to engage in an amends process because of the nature or dynamic of a relationship. But expanding beyond that, the main thing is there are those everyday resentments and the like that don't require a deeply engaged process. Not everyone's in recovery, right? That's a very specific solution set based upon people's personal paths to healing. The thing is, for all of us, we can be comfortable, if we can actually free ourselves and find relief in letting go of those resentments. I think there's a lot of folks out there who can find new license to be a little bit more happier.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's this resentment that we hold on to, even when we're not speaking to somebody, or that we just hold on a certain situation or a time in our life. I mean, this travels with us
forever,
indefinitely, if we let it. We take that. We might transgress into other lives with it. We don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm thinking that trends have probably shown that might be the case. It's hard to fight with ghosts in your head, you know what I mean, of situations that are hypothetical a lot of times and don't really happen. I know we've all been there where we felt like somebody did us wrong, or that we were angry about a certain thing, and we carried that with us and flipped it around every which way we could in our mind, and then come to find out that wasn't the case at all, maybe, and maybe that we were just I think that it's hard from the we're all having our own experience in these multitudes of shared experiences. So it's easy to think that everything is directed at us or towards us.
Yeah.
A lot of times, none of it has anything to do with us.
And people generally aren't thinking about me, you, or anybody else.
Yeah, they're usually dealing with the same thing in their own head about something else. They're trying to get through their day.
Yeah, I mean, that's another component of it. A lot of this stuff shouldn't be taken personally, because this specific action was done in a self-serving way. Yeah. And it wasn't about you, me, or anybody else in the situation. It was about the principal agent doing something.
Yeah. Let me ask you some.
Sure.
Going back to your father and the situation, this is a man that obviously reached the height of a career path that's possible, well and beloved by the world. Is this something that there was warning signs to? Is it something that just you weren't aware of? Obviously, we're all living our own lives as well. Is did it come as a, I mean, obviously there's shock around that type of thing anyway, but is that something, did he deal with that you were aware of growing up that you saw firsthand?
Yeah, so we were very close.
Yeah.
And there were ebbs and flows of frustration, depression, isolation, potentially
Artists
self-medication.
tend to be very, being on stage is a very big rush, you know what I mean?
Well, let's look at the life of a comedian.
Yeah.
It's a
They
very
tend to be pretty dark, you know?
it's a very challenging lifestyle.
Uh-huh.
And there's advantages to it, there's disadvantages to it, just like anything.
Yeah.
But when you're a comedian, you're going out and you're bearing your soul
Yeah.
with the explicit intention of being laughed at,
And your perception of reality.
and your perception of reality. And so, when you create a career out of that, and it's an age-old
lot.
career, it's not,
No.
this has been around for millennia.
Yeah.
When you create a career around that, and you first off, your starting point is oriented around a certain way, seeking validation, seeking ways in which you can feel good about yourself, good about, and I'm not just speaking in my father's case, I'm talking about
Yeah,
kind of
generally.
the
I get it.
comedic
Yeah.
profession. It can create all sorts of issues relating to feeling comfortable with oneself, feeling comfortable, bearing the weight of becoming a public figure. There's failure associated with it. I mean, constant failure.
Constant failure. And
Constant.
it's a rough, like the
Yeah.
travel circuit of stand-up is incredibly tough.
It's brutal.
It has its way with most.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And so, I would say, in experiencing or in listening to my father in terms of his experience, it was really challenging at times.
Yeah.
Coinciding with that is also some of the most incredible times and
100%.
periods of
The highs are
bliss and
incredible.
happiness
Yeah.
and so forth. And so, this is like anybody's journey. For me personally, what was catalyzed in kind of learning about him and his journey and understanding our relationship and friendship and, relationship as a son, and, with him as a father and me as a son, was that, for me, I'm not continuing what he sought out to do, which was very much relating to helping people laugh and helping people learn. I'm seeking to be happy through service.
Yeah.
And so it's a different configuration, but the general
Idea
premise
is
is we're seeking to I'm seeking to take care of myself through understanding what my healing process looks like while seeking to support and maximize my positive impact with others.
Have you made peace with that decision for him? Have you? It's been a while, but it's multiple levels of digesting that.
Yeah, sure. I'd say personally,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I'd say, there's a more complex way of answering that in terms of, we're all along our own personal journeys, and for me, as it relates to, my perspective on it, I see, I'm a spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
I see it, I believe in a number of different elements relating to, our journeys in this world and beyond. And, there is a sense of peace in the sense that whatever was catalyzed in me throughout, my experience, my relationship and so forth, has led me down a path of continuing to honor him, his legacy, without necessarily doing it in his way. want to do things my own way, and they relate to my healing process. So it's a continual process of discovering more peace and serenity.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say no. There's not like the more complex way of answering it is, it's a process.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that there is some, you know, it's a lot to digest. So I'm glad that just to make peace. I think that he would want you to have peace in his journey, and then going forward, it to be, you know, we all have our singular journeys, our way, you know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Pim and what's ahead of the company, and what you guys, you know, what's next.
I mean, really what we've identified is something that we can help people with, specifically young people with, is attention. Mm-hmm. We're launching an attention product. That's a natural nutritional solution for attention.
Yeah.
It's going to be called the Attention Chew.
Good.
And really, the underlying foundation of that product is it's all amino acids. Pardon me. It's primarily amino acids. There's some minerals, and we have one adaptogen in it. But you know, through our journey in launching in 2020, and our first product was called the Original Mood Chew. It's for stress and feelings of overwhelm and so forth. And we started attracting scientists, psychologists, medical researchers who are interested in nutritional solutions, natural solutions for mental well-being. And we started realizing, oh wow, there's all these deficiencies that people are experiencing that are contributing to dysregulation or things like distraction and so forth. And we're like, what can we do to create a product to help people with attention? And it took several months to do, but next month we're launching a product to support this issue that so many kids are having. And so it's meant for high schoolers, college students. It's nutritional in nature. I'm excited for that product. We're launching a AM and PM powder.
Awesome.
One's for the evening. It's magnesium based with some others actives in it. The other is for the morning, and really what it is, it's meant to be kind of in the morning, the hydration. You can mix it with water, you can mix it with smoothie, could maybe mix it with coffee, although I wouldn't recommend it. That's meant to be kind of all you might need for, you know, your body's neurotransmitter health, and to some respect the body's brain health. There are omegas that aren't in it. You kind of need to take omegas in a pill, or, you know, eat enough omegas in your diet to help balance it out. We sell omegas at our company, but aside from that, it's kind of like the full stack solution for, you know, foundational care.
Firing, right?
Yeah. So we're launching a AM product, a PM product, and then our attention products next, and that'll keep us busy for a while.
Yeah.
And we've
The PM product, does it help sleep, or does it help regulate, you know, turning off, so to speak?
Yeah.
These days?
So we've become kind of obsessed with this compound called magnesium 3-8. Mm-hmm. It's a more bioavailable magnesium. It was formulated out of MIT.
Yeah, most of us are deficient too, if I'm not.
We are, yeah.
Right.
I believe it. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's the majority of Americans are deficient, and not every magnesium is equal.
Mm-hmm. No, I know that.
Yeah.
From the plant world, it's definitely not.
There's kind of crappy magnesiums. Mm-hmm. Pardon me. Quite literally crappy magnesiums that help us shit. But you know, there are other types of magnesiums that contribute to, you know, stress support, help sleep, and the like. And you know, we've found there's a specific flavonoid too that's not magnesium. I mean, magnesium is not a flavonoid; it's a mineral. But there's a flavonoid called apigenin that's helpful for sleep. There's things like tart cherry, which are great for helping facilitate melatonin development without just mainlining melatonin into your system, which can actually dysregulate a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there's different ways
The key is to get us to function properly.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Yeah. I mean,
to the best of our ability.
Look, through our journey in creating the company and learning more about our diets, especially the relationship between our diets and our mental well-being, we're just not eating the right things, and they're actually hard to find in high concentrations. I'll give you an example. Fermented foods, really good for the GABA system, and also really good for the microbiota. So the microbiota plays a key role in supporting the development of serotonin. Kimchi, sauerkraut, certain yogurts and the like are really great for facilitating both GABA, supporting the GABA system through giving you GABA, and through supporting the gut biome, which are really important for the gut-brain connection and serotonin synthesis. We don't eat a ton of fermented foods.
No.
If you come from certain cultures, Asian cultures tend to have things more things like pickles. Just eating a pickle, a Clausen's pickle, doesn't have kind of the robust
you need that old school
probiotic environment.
Fermented. Over time.
And so we're just, that's one example. There's some, there's a vegetable and greens example, but there's also things that are actually contributing to creating us more, contributing to enabling us to be more deficient. High sugar diets, they lead to increased cortisol spikes, glycemic spikes impact organ health, end up, creating issues with your body's metabolism, which can lead to things like anxiety and depression and so forth. And so, it's what we eat and it's also what we don't eat. And the main thing is like, I don't eat particularly well. I just eat more mindfully than I did. And I still have things like affinity for sugar. Right. But there's certain things that I kind of draw a line with. I don't eat processed foods. If I can help it.
I've been better about that as well. We're kind of being mindful of fresh, raw, real food and trying to, develop that way in those habits.
And the thing is like there's little tweaks that you can make throughout the day that actually make a major impact. And you can actually track for yourself if you're eating fast food and the like. And I eat fast food. I don't have, I'll eat McDonald's.
We all do.
I don't eat McDonald's.
You don't eat McDonald's.
I mean, I do sometimes when I have to.
Right. It's important to understand, notice how you feel afterwards.
Like shit. That's why I stopped eating it.
Well, it's the challenge with it, right? Is that, there's a trade-off to eating fast food, And so, when it comes to eating all this stuff, I encourage listeners to start being mindful of how they're feeling afterwards. Because you'll start noticing. And so the main thing is like, hey, if you're going to eat, this, a Big Mac, or you're going to eat, ice cream or something, just note how you feel afterwards. And
not the initial the delivery, because the delivery is great. That's what we're addicted.
Give it 15 minutes.
But how you feel down the road in the next hours. It's usually a telltale of, I shouldn't have done that last night. You know what I mean? Because I can go to Trader Joe's and stock up on all my favorite snacks, and then wake up the next morning and be like, that was a bad choice.
Here's the thing: is that I'm kind of like, I'm not a hardliner around a lot of this stuff.
I don't like to hardline anything because I feel like that in itself becomes a problem.
too. And I have friends who are hardliners who are care deeply around their nutrition and things like that, and they're in better shape than me. But the fact of the matter is that when it comes to consuming all this stuff, the main thing is that like you can eat fast food. Like
it's all about moderation.
It's all about moderation.
It's about
right?
being aware of it, like you said, being aware of how you feel, and it's also about. No, if you eat fast food every day, 3 times a day, you're going to have a certain life path.
Well, you're going to have what's going to happen is you're going to have a metabolic issue.
Yes.
And that's
metabolic and mental.
Mental issue.
Well, but it turns out now they're interrelated with one another. Right?
Like I have an uncle that's staying with my mom right now, and he's got early stage dementia. And when he's staying at his daughter's house, she's eating McDonald's, all the crap. And then he comes to my mom's house for a couple of days, and you can see the huge transitional shift just in that short amount of time.
You see the cognition improve. Yeah. And so there is now research around food as medicine that, for all sorts of conditions, right? So whether it involves heart disease, there's some interesting research that's going on now at different academic institutions around how neurodegenerative diseases, even early onset, can be, slowed down.
Yeah.
There's still more research that needs to be done to determine whether they can be reversed. But, I cited how you can support mental health considerations with it. So, it's very clear the relationship between food and our general health. The main thing is like, how do we support behavior change?
Yeah, we gotta break these habits that we've been accustomed to.
And, if you're asking someone, the challenge is this whole diet culture thing where it's like, hey, do this extreme thing.
Yeah.
Where, it's like, whatever, fucking, like coffee enemas, like just some something. It could be anything.
There's a million of them.
Replace it. It's a Mad Lib, right?
Yeah.
It's like, something and something else. And we need to figure out ways in which we can integrate it within our life where it's not just some sort of extreme diet for a period of time.
It's got to be a lifestyle change.
Yeah. And, that's the challenge with things like the ketogenic diet, right? It's like, there's now research showing if you adhere to it for 4 to 5 months, that it has a statistically significant effect if you experience certain types of serious mental illness. And that's clinically proven.
Yeah.
So like there is, but to implement that diet
good for you in certain
Yeah.
instances, but it is meant to only be
right, in specific instances. So the question is, how can one implement, little changes in their life that don't degrade what they would perceive as the quality of their life? Like you don't want people feeling like they're being deprived of stuff.
No, we should be rewarding people for doing the right thing.
Right, and
It's the opposite is kind of the common, functionality and things.
yeah, because the thing is, you can eat most things you like, at a reasonable clip. But if we're getting these overages in things that are reasonably deficient or not reasonably, totally deficient,
Yeah.
Aside from, simple sugars, certain processed carbohydrates and unhealthy fats, we're not going to have a good time in general.
No.
Right. And so, we could go on and on about it.
We gotta, and like, we have children, we're building a future for them, and in them we get to change, societal and generational norms as well. So the beauty of science coming to a head and I feel like a merging of tech, science, and spirituality and all of these things kind of coming together.
Yeah.
And hopefully our children will come out better for it through this like tumultuous time in our existence.
Yeah.
It's a very exciting but very scary time because things are changing at such a rapid pace.
Well, that's where the mental hygiene component comes in. Is like, take care of yourself every day so you can show up for
and these are
others.
habits that we can instill in them that will, they'll continue to have a different life path than we had because we came from a time that this wasn't something that you talked about. I mean, mental health was not something that you talked about. You talked to a shrink or to your therapist or
you were looked at like you were crazy.
Or a court-ordered social worker or something along those lines. Yeah.
But that was the only time. You weren't allowed to speak of that. Not even to your parents in most instances. It wasn't something, I know people that, have never gotten a hug from their father or like never had any type of we've had this conversation before, right? No instance of emotional or physical emotional support,
No, I got every gift I ever wanted, but that wasn't what I needed.
Yeah. And dealing with that,
I still deal with that.
Yeah. Let's go light real quick while we wrap up. We just had a couple of cool questions for you, actually.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay, what was it like? What was it like growing up with Robin Wilaims as your father?
Well, so our specific relationship focused on, at least in terms of our leisure time, focused very much on things like video games, comic books, and exploration of science fiction. Like we love watching Star Trek together. Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah.
And so, for us, that's how we bonded and spent time together. So, he was more quiet and reserved around me, but we would play video games, watch sci-fi movies, and hang out in that sense. So like, it was awesome.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. I like that. I'm a big sci-fi guy too. It's fun. Do you have a favorite film of his or a piece of work that?
Good Morning Vietnam.
Good Morning Vietnam, great one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that film as well. And then, how did his career influence your decision on your path career-wise? Did there ever be a time that you wanted to step into acting, or that was, I mean, you went to NYU, obviously.
I did, for a period, I did take acting classes at the Lee Strasberg Institute.
Yeah, nice, great place.
I like building things, and I like business.
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself more attuned to kind of being behind the camera, or not even close to a camera.
Yeah.
So what my father wanted for me is to be happy doing what I do. And so I'd say it was kind of like more of a, I wasn't pushed to be a doctor or lawyer or, work in any profession, which, has some advantages, but also, for me, it had some disadvantages too, because I needed to kind of craft my own path. And it really started coming into view over the past, I'd say, 10 years, but it took a little bit of time.
Yeah, it does. It's tough. Sometimes having a clear-cut path can be easy for a human, and then other times, having an open slate, it's hard to find our passion and our fit. I try to tell my kids the same. I just want them to be happy first, and two, to find something that they're excited to get up and get to every day. It's definitely, that's my goal for them, is to be happy first, and then to find their path as well. We should get our sons together. I have a 4-year-old son as well.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know if you're around.
Yeah,
we live near one another.
Yeah, so. Exactly. That would be cool. Always need some good buddies, Anything else you want to share about the company before we wrap up, or anything else in your life at the time being?
I mean, at the end of the day, the more we can learn around how we can use things like nutrition to support our mental well-being. There's a lot of really simple things we can do to help ourselves. That's pretty straightforward. It might involve our company products, but in a lot of situations, there's just lifestyle changes, and it could have a sea change in how people feel at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day.
Yeah.
And so, I encourage, whether it's, visit our website, pim.com, but also just look up ways in which you can support things like serotonin, GABA, our catecholamine system, so dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine system, that make up that system, and so forth. A lot of us are experiencing burnout, and there's ways in which we can support things like our adrenal glands to manage that burnout. We don't have to feel the way we feel. We can change how we feel. I know that sounds like a very,
that's all that needs
simple
to be said,
framing, but
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
It's actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And then looking beyond that, there's all sorts of other things beyond nutrition, but I just encourage everyone to discover the mental hygiene solutions that work best for them.
Yeah. And then you talked about doing a lot of free content on social and stuff for the company. Where can people find that at?
Oh yeah, Instagram, Twitter. We're working on TikTok a little bit more.
What's the handle?
It's You Can Pim.
You Can Pim.
At You Can Pim.
I'll put it
We'll
down
put
below.
it down below so they'll be able to read it.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, you got any other questions before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot of amazing topics.
Yeah. There'll be more scientifical. I don't want to say
You had me at scientific.
Yeah, exactly. There's more things on the site, and where people can figure out how these amino acids break down and why they do what they do and stuff like that.
Yeah. We write a lot about it, and the thing is too is there's also things like adaptogens. Mushrooms are big on people's mind relative to improving cognition and so forth. And I just encourage people to start learning more about natural solutions of course, we're very focused on things like amino acids, but there's a broader spectrum of things that can help folks.
Yeah, definitely. So, thanks for joining us. There is help out there. Please, go to PIM and see what they can do to help and what information they can share to help you along the path of feeling better at the start and the end of the day. I mean, I don't think, I know we are all bombarded by technology and thoughts and
Oh, yeah.
overload of information and bad diet. So I think that there's help out there. And for all the men watching, it's okay to open up and to be vulnerable sometimes and to share what's going on inside. I think that we need to say that.
Well, just also don't let resentment control your decisions.
There you go.
It's a great opportunity to relieve yourself of caring what other people think.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I struggle with myself, and I think that we all carry a little bit of resentment or guilt and things with us, and sometimes just letting it go can be the weight lifted that we need to be okay.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Thanks. Like,
Pleasure.
subscribe, share. Peace.